Hello everyone, welcome to HIM 216. This is a discussion of Chapter 6 in your textbook, and we have been talking about the root operations that are on page 98 and 99. And for your homework, you're doing, one of the things you're doing for your homework or coursework is the exercise 6-3, those odd-numbered questions. And body part is listed on page 101. Now, what I want to make sure you understand about body part, which is the fourth character, is this identifies the specific part of the body on which the procedure was performed. So every body system has corresponding body parts. So for instance, if you look at the table that is in your textbook or on the screen, we'll go to medical surgical, and then we can go to respiratory, which is certainly where the information for the lungs is found. Respiratory system B. And if in fact we choose the root operation of destruction, which is what they've done in your book, then we can see all of these different body parts. So if the procedure was performed on the trachea, you choose that. If it was the middle lobe of the right bronchus, you would choose number 5. So you can see that these body parts are very specific. And of course, if not, if you can't find your body part, let's click on this question mark for body part. It only includes the trachea and the main bronchus. But if you have a body part and you don't see it here, go over to the Help tab and then choose the appropriate resource, the body part key, and look there. Use those resources. They will be very beneficial to you. On page 102, we talked about the different approaches, and I apologize if I'm going back over this, and computer and robotic assisted surgery. On page 105, we're talking about device, and it's very important to understand the definition of device. The device is the 6th character in a code, and in order to use device, you have to be using the root operations that always involve a device. So on page 99 in your book, those root operations from change to supplement, they always involve a device. And a device is left in the body. It is not something that is a suture or a ligature. It's not absorbable. It's not incorporated into a body part. It can take the place of all or a portion of a body part, like a hip replacement or a knee replacement. It can assist or prevent a physiological function. And then on page 106, it can be a mechanical or electrical appliance that assists, monitors, or takes the place of a physiological function. And again, it tells you here that if the materials are a part of the procedure, they are not coded as a device. If something is a drain that will be removed later, it's not considered a device. And again, when we do Chapter 8, we're actually going to go over many coding scenarios for you. Now, a qualifier is the 7th character. It's a unique value for an individual procedure, and it's going to be different many times for every procedure that we look at. The one constant with the qualifier is Z, which means there is no qualifier. So that's used very often with these medical surgical codes. Let's look, if we look at bypass, you'll see the qualifier is very different. This has to do with what type of material was used for a bypass. We'll go over that much more when we're in that particular chapter of ICD-10. I want to show you excision, because one of the other common qualifiers that you will see is diagnostic. So if the description of the procedure tells you that it's a diagnostic, you choose X. That means they're sending pathology to the lab to be evaluated so they can determine what type of tissue they're looking at. For instance, if we look, well, let's look at a respiratory system, and let's look at excision, and we can change that, see that the only options that we have are diagnostic and no qualifier. So it can be different based on which body system you are in. Now I want to talk about the coding guidelines. And I want you to turn to page 109. The coding guidelines start off with conventions, just like they do in CM. So this is information that tells you how to use the codes, information that applies to all the codes that are in this procedural coding system. When you turn to page 110, Section B is the medical and surgical section guidelines, and so that's primarily what we are going to be studying in PCS, or the medical surgical guidelines. Then you can see under medical surgical there are general guidelines for body system, general guidelines for root operations. Well, for root operation we have general guidelines. We have guidelines when multiple procedures are performed. Go up to page 111, discontinued procedures, B3.3. Under that, biopsy procedures. And as you come down the page, I want you to turn to page 112. Now, I don't want you to get hung up on the fusion procedures. We, in fact, will do very little spinal fusion coding, and as a new coder, I would not expect you ever to be given a chart for a patient that had any kind of a fusion performed. The inspection procedures, inspections are done fairly commonly. The most important part about an inspection is if a more definitive procedure is performed, you do not code an inspection. And you'll notice that these are actually root operations. So excision is a root operation, inspection is a root operation, bypass is a root operation. So on page 113, B4, section B4 of the guidelines, are guidelines related to body part. And we have general guidelines, and these are the guidelines when you're actually looking at a 7-character code. These are guidelines related to this 4th character, which is body part. Branches of body part, bilateral body part values. You need just to take time to read these. Hopefully they will make some sense to you. Make note of what's confusing to you. And then these are things that we will actually be going over when we're going over specific examples and actually doing specific coding. Now on page 114, there are guidelines related to approach, which is the 5th character. B6 are the device coding guidelines. And then we have guidelines on page 115 for selection of the principal procedure. For homework, you're going to be doing the odd-numbered questions for exercise 6.6. True, false, all related to terms and definitions. And then you have the chapter review exercise, the odd-numbered questions 1 through 19. Now, when we get over to questions 13 through 17, you're being asked to use the index and identify the first 3 or 4 characters of the code, not the full code. We just want to see that you can use this index. So if I look at fragmentation, write your reader will stone. In the index, I can begin typing in fragmentation, there's my term. And my body part is the ureter. And right. So the answer to number 14, which you should be able to find in your student resources, is 0TF6. That's all this question is asking you. What are the 3 or 4 characters that you find in the index? If we look at 16, resection adrenal glands. So let's look. Resection is a root operation. And if I try to put in adrenal glands, I don't find it. But if I put in gland, adrenal, and this says adrenal glands, so that means it's bilateral. So the first 4 characters would be 0GT4. So that's all you're being asked to do for 13, 15, and 17. For number 17, now for number 17, the root operation is introduction, and a central line goes into the vein, and under vein you'll find central. So for number 17, the answer is 3E04. That one's a little more challenging. And then for 19, you're assigning the code in accordance with the guidelines. And number 19 is a therapeutic thoracentesis of the right pleural cavity. You have to spell right here as well. So when we go to thoracentesis in the index, it sends us to the table 0W9. And this is the pleural cavity of the right. And you need to determine what the approach is going to be. And then I will tell you that a drainage device was not placed. So that's going to conclude this lecture for Chapter 6. My hope is that you have plenty of time to read and study this information. Please do let me know if you have any questions.